Sometimes when I wake up early in the morning, I like to just try and read a bunch of comments, digging into the section to try and find out what people are talking about, what criticisms they're giving me, or maybe just what things they want me to dig into in the future. And what's kind of bizarre is, over the course of the last 24 to 72 hours, there has been a bunch of very heavy discussion about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, but very specifically about its spoilers. Now, this game may have come out 20 some odd years ago, but it's actually a story that some people probably don't know about. So at this point, should we be careful about that or not? What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and I want to dig into this topic because, obviously, this is my favorite game of all time. I've beaten it so much that at this point, I can literally recite the entire script to you purely from memory. I spend that freaking much time with this game. So to me, it's hard to even think about this stuff as spoilers, simply because to me, it's just truth. It's just character development. It's just pieces of, well, my own backstory at this point because I've played it so freaking much. But I have to try and remember that a lot of people didn't grow up with that. If you were born around maybe 1999 or maybe the early 2000s, you've never tried Final Fantasy VII, or if you have, you probably didn't get far in it. This isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying that you young gamers, I'm just saying that some people have not beaten it. Despite the fact that it's sold over 10 million copies and has now been ported to every console from the Switch to the Xbox One, it doesn't mean that the overall consensus is ubiquitous. Not every person has played it in the world yet. So there are some people who don't know the major plot elements. So what do we do about that? Now, to me, this entire scenario is very, very strange, not just because I've beaten Final Fantasy a bunch, but I've beaten all the extraneous media. There are actually a lot of sequels and prequels they did as well for Final Fantasy VII. Obviously, we had the Advent Children movie, which I own on Blu-ray, despite the fact that it's kind of weird. Of course, we have the prequel, Crisis Core, the sequel, Dirge of Cerberus, where one of the characters becomes the god of destruction. These are actual canon pieces of the Final Fantasy universe. A lot of people call it the compilation. Now, here's what's weird. All of this stuff, we don't know what to do about it. Is this stuff still real? Is this going to be rolled into the Final Fantasy VII Remake as flashbacks or flash forwards? We really don't have any idea. So is all of this spoilers? I guess to me personally, the way I'm probably going to try and handle this is to talk about the characters, the motivations in the universe, but I'll try and avoid the major spoilers and twists, because there is stuff in this that quite obviously is something that you could easily consider as a spoiler. Like, of course, first and foremost, the fact that a character dies. Now, I'm not even going to try and allude to which person does it, or I'm not going to ask people to Google it. I'm just saying that I guess at this point, we do sort of have to think about this as a new game, despite the fact that it's based on something that is decades and decades old. I think that a good way to try and handle this is perhaps very much the way a lot of people right now are treating the It remakes. So obviously, It is a book that came out a million years ago, written by Stephen King. It's very, very good. I'm happy I've actually read it. Then in the 90s was the very famous It television show, which is what most of us actually got terrified with, and it gave a lot of people their permanent fear of clowns. But recently, in the last couple of years, we started getting the official remakes that are now completely redone. The time period is different, the actors are different. It is a complete redoing of the original story, but it follows the same beats. Now the final chapter of this, It Chapter 2, is about to be released, and a lot of people are already digging into the spoilers. Obviously, Pennywise, the dancing clown, Mr. Evil himself, is actually going to die, right? I mean, the book came out in like the 60s. I think we're allowed to talk about the fact that this is done. This was released. This is already a part of the global consciousness. It's kind of hard not to look at trailers and stuff of it and just already go, oh, I know where this is going because I watched or read it back in the freaking 80s. How do we actually approach this with Final Fantasy VII, though? To me, I actually think that this approach isn't wrong. Now, while I may be trying to avoid a lot of the major spoilers and really big detail beats, I will not fault anybody else for doing so. I'm actually good friends with some people who run like Final Fantasy channels. Like my good buddy is actually the Night Sky Prince. This guy just basically does Final Fantasy news lots of stuff on like Square Enix updates and lots of different like leaks and details about the Final Fantasy VII Remake specifically. Well, this guy, sometimes he talks spoilers because, I mean, frick, these games came out so long ago. At this point, they're basically just universal truths. I think that's going into it, though, out of respect, you should try and be careful. Now, if you're talking to your friend in real life and they've already beaten the game, of course, rip into it. Of course, just be excited for it. Now, to me, I do actually have a theory that they're going to be dramatically changing the story in its pacing styles. So at this point, the developers have now actually fully confirmed that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be episodic. Most likely it is going to be 3 full games, basically the Final Fantasy VII trilogy. Now this is something that's a little bit controversial and people are feeling a little bit conflicted by it, but to me, I'm excited as to what the heck it's going to be. It seems like the opening chapter could be Midgar. We could have a final, a middle one that's going to basically be like the quest to find the ancients, where we go to the ancient city and then maybe end off with the final battle to try and find and track down and stop Sephiroth. These, in my opinion, are good bookmark ends. They're good spots to try and stop the story and pick the story back up. And to me, I feel like you're going to have to actually change a lot of stuff in order to drag this out. Like if the early one is just Midgar, you're going to need to try and put a lot of different flashbacks in there and stuff to pad it out. Maybe you could roll in a lot of the content of Crisis Core and maybe the prequel cell phone game that they only had in Japan, all about the Turks. This stuff to me is extremely exciting, and really, it's something that could be possible. I mean, you gotta realize they're trying to make this game different enough that people are going to buy it. A lot of people right now are looking at the gameplay trailers and starting to be like, oh no, this looks a little bit too much like the combat system of Final Fantasy XV, and they're getting turned off. Everybody's probably still gonna purchase it, but still, they're trying to make this game different enough that every Final Fantasy fan and newcomers is going to pick it up. I mean, let's just kind of sit back here and be very, very serious. Square Enix needs this to be a hit. They've been working on it for so many years. I mean, some of the earliest test art apparently was done in like the PlayStation 3 era, and here we are now at the end of the PlayStation 4 era, and we're finally getting in-depth gameplay trailers. They've probably spent millions and millions and millions of dollars just trying to get this project off the ground. So it does need to be a huge hit, and I do think that they're probably going to try and do their best on their own to avoid spoilers. Square Enix is somebody who's a little bit weird about spoilers in general. Like if you go to a lot of the shops and stuff for like digital versions of Final Fantasy VII, sometimes they'll just literally show a main character's funeral basically, because at this point they're like, look, you're buying it, you probably know. But that's not exactly true. I really enjoy covering a lot of stuff about Nintendo Switch on this channel. Sometimes I'll do like Switch ports and stuff just because I legitimately love my Switch. And what I find very, very strange a lot of times when I talk to ultra diehard Nintendo fanboys is that very often these people only play Nintendo products. They don't actually buy anything else. They went NES, SNES, Nintendo 64, GameCube, Wii, Wii U, and now this. And so because of it, they have never played Final Fantasy VII. They've never tried Final Fantasy IX. They've never gotten to see the great, crazy hymns of Final Fantasy X. And so now, going into the Final Fantasy VII Remake trailers, they're genuinely shocked because they're like, what the heck is going on? So simultaneously, why it's exciting to see that, I realize that I need to try and be a little bit more careful about my approach to it. So basically, I'm making you a promise. In all my Final Fantasy related content, especially when it comes to 7 and the remake, I'm going to do my very, very best not to ruin any of the surprises. I want you to love this as much as I have loved this. This is the opportunity for a new generation to discover and hopefully relish Final Fantasy freaking 7, and I am not going to get in the way of that. But what do you think? Is it ridiculous to try and not spoil a game that's this old? Or at this point, is it just a free-for-all? Are you allowed to say that beep dies? Well, I'm going to try not to. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Alright. Be good in the comment section, okay? Just be good. I don't really moderate my comments, but just don't... Come on, alright? Let's be adults. Thank you. I love you guys a bunch. I respect you. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.